This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Ken, thank you for joining us today.
Nope.
Tell me, firstly, where are you calling in from? And just a bit about who you are and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm based near Brighton in England. I'm originally from Scotland, but I'm about as far south from Glasgow as I can get without getting my feet wet. So I'm down in the south of England. Founder and chief executive of a business called Talent Partners. Talent Partners is a global talent insights business. We work across the whole kind of talent supply chain. So that means we engage with employers, typically larger employers, and then a whole range of vendors who might be big staffing firms, outsourcing businesses, a whole range of talent technology businesses, and then a whole kind of cohort of advisors, whether that's in education, government, professional services, things like that. And really, we used to say that a kind of overarching mission is helping employers find and keep the people they need. I think that's evolving as we move away from this notion of who does work to how work gets done. It's a bit of a cliche, but actually within that, I think of some kind of profound challenges for organizations.
And what does a typical day look for you right now in the role that you have?
Well, fortunately, there's no such thing as a typical day. We do probably four things. We do events, we do awards, we do content, and we do membership. And really, the heart of what we do is having discussions and debates to try and unearth those kind of insights around that kind of talent and workforce agenda. So that, as I say, that could be workshops or awards, which we had a big campaign ceremony last week with big outsourcing for businesses. And because we take it really seriously, they take it seriously. So it's kind of independent and rigorous and all that good stuff. So we get to see what innovation is coming down the pipe, to see what's landing, sometimes, what isn't. So we get some amazing insight from our awards campaigns. And then, the conversations that we're having, I spoke to the CEO of a big organizational engineering business earlier this morning, talking about some of the innovative things they were doing in this new economy. What I enjoy most is the kind of external facing stuff and the engagement around, those conversations that everyone is having at the moment about the changing nature of work.
And it is just that. And I think I'm very keen to know, because you are at the forefront and you're liaising with a lot of industries, a lot of sectors. What do you see are the major shifts in skills, talent, and the future of work?
So you've got, I think, two big things happening at the moment. You've got political and economic uncertainty. Now, I know we've always had that to a degree, but I think, right now it's pretty, pronounced. So that's causing a lot of organizations to really look very closely at their cost bases and efficiency, and that's driving a certain amount of behavior within organizations. And then that's the uncertainty. And then the certainty you have is technological progress. Everyone talks about AI, but it's really a combination of AI and automation. And to oversimplify it a little bit, you can say automation is coming for low-level work and AI is coming from mid-level work. Not entirely true, but there is a sense of that big change and that kind of very rapid evolution of automation and AI really having an impact on how we work in a way that we've never felt before.
And when you look at talent acquisition and even talent management, how do you think it is impacting the digital transformation or AI in terms of the overall strategy? What are you seeing are the changes, or even within your own company?
This is going to sound like I'm a really mean boss. At the beginning of this year, I said to our team, all of you need to be able to answer the question how you're using AI to improve your job. And, we're an information services business. And I said, and if you don't like that, you can leave. But if you leave and you go for an interview, the first question they'll ask you is, how have you used AI in your last role to make things better? And if you can't answer that, then you're not going to get the job. So you might as well stay here and do it. I said it slightly more diplomatically than that, but not much. I think that understanding of how we all have that responsibility to upskill ourselves, to understand what new skills we need to do the job that we're being paid. And within talent acquisition, so I think there's two different things with talent acquisition and talent management. Talent acquisition really has moved from who does the work to how work gets done. So it's really what a TA leader needs to learn to do really quite quickly is to look at the tasks within their organization and say, do I need a person? Do I need technology, or do I need some form of augmentation? And not just default to let me go and try and hire someone. So I think that shift is real and current. So yeah, a TA person can't just be concerned with the acquisition of humans. It needs to be looking at, the task that needs doing and saying what combination of, human skills, technology capability, or augmentation do I need to get the work done? Talent management, I think the most urgent challenge for them is reskilling and upskilling their workforce, whether that's their future workforce or their current workforce. People talk about skills being the new currency, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. Being able to reskill and upskill yourself continuously. We're now in a world that we call transformation as usual. There's no such thing as business as usual. It's continuous transformation. And, one of the implications for that is you have to look at your own skill set and say, what do I have now and what am I going to need going forward? And you need your organization, your employer to help facilitate that. But that's really the individual needs to take primary responsibility for developing their own skill set. But you absolutely want to be working with an employer who's going to help you do that and encourage you to do that. And I think that's where talent management have got a hugely important part to play.
So you mentioned there at the beginning of the year talking about, everyone having to look at AI and seeing how they could improve their own workflow. What has worked well? What have you implemented this year so far that you feel from a talent skills perspective, yeah, that's worked by automating?
So there's a spectrum of things. So one of our apprentices, we do a monthly kind of market report that's really looking at labor market data and trying to triangulate it a little bit to spot the patterns and the trends, and then make some observations from that. He has got much more sophisticated at using ChatGPT to help him create a kind of base case that he can then interrogate. And people talk about this new skill of prompt engineering. Well, prompt engineering is just asking intelligent questions, right? That's what prompt engineering is. And you absolutely cannot trust, what you get from large language models. You have to be able to interrogate it and test its sources and its assumptions. So he's learned to do that. And that's enabled him to be far more efficient. It used to take him a week to produce our 3 market reports. We do one for Europe, one for APAC, and one for the US. And now that's like a day and a half. At a more strategic level, we've launched our community platform, Talent IQ, and that's opportunity to bring together everyone in our ecosystem to be able to be in the same, we call it a market square, to be able to discuss, debate, share ideas, share challenges, and learn from each other. And that's a kind of AI-based platform. And the functionality that has to, really enable, everyone in our world. We talk about it as a kind of global concierge, right? Being able to come to Talent Partners and Talent IQ, even if we don't know the answer, we can very quickly find someone who does. So that's a more strategic way that we've been using AI.
That sounds amazing. Really, really great. That loop can be really impactful. And is there anything that feels still like a struggle that you're looking at with AI to go, well, we need to improve that this year, next year? And what would that be?
So one of the most common challenges people have in implementing AI is organizing their data in the first place, which means getting the humans to put the data into into the system. Right? And we're not terrible at it, but we need to be better. How we use it. We've got HubSpot, right? And HubSpot is brilliant if you use it properly. But you can only really start connecting HubSpot up to various agents to do other tasks if your data is really good, and our data isn't bad, but it's not good enough. So, and that's a very common challenge, I think, for organizations when they think about, implementing AI. The first thing they've got to start with is how do they organize the data? Because if AI is working off poor, fragmented data, not only is it not going to give you what you need, it's going to give you the opposite of what you need. It's going to give you stuff you really can't trust.
And what is the impact of that when you're trying to get the right data into whatever system you're using? What is the impact in terms of the team's performance or the client's performance? How does that correlate?
When you do it well, it just makes everything more efficient, and it allows people to do the things that they most enjoy doing. No one ever really enjoys, sitting in front of a database and updating it. So, how do you take the note takers that we use in meetings and take that data and, you can't just automatically download it to your CRM. There still needs to be that human element of making sure it's what you want to go in. But it's just getting into different working patterns that just takes a while for people to get used to.
And overall, again, looking at talent acquisition, the future of recruitment, like which skills or talent metrics are you most focused on in improving in the years ahead?
So, I mean, this is the conversation that we had in a workshop with a whole bunch of employers just last week, where, someone was saying, cost per hire and time to hire are redundant. But then you say, okay, well, what would you use, instead? And people say, well, we want the quality of the hire or impact of hire, which again, people have been talking about for years. But the challenge is, how do you define that? How do you actually articulate what the criteria are to determine the impact or the quality of hire? I've always had a very simplistic view of it, which is if your employee is still with you after 2 years, that's a big tick. It's easy to measure. In 2 years, you've not fired them, they've not left. So, you're clearly not unhappy. Now, they might just be a middle ranking performer, right? They might not be, shooting the lights out. But nevertheless, it's someone that you're still happy to have in your organization. So for me, that would be a big tick. And then everyone could compare across organizations and industries and sectors how well they're doing. But people overcomplicate it. And so you end up that no one's really measuring it in any kind of meaningful way. And there's no common kind of language around it. One area that people are looking at is kind of time to effectiveness and trying to measure that. But again, you run into a lot of the same issues. What is effective? In a sales job, that's pretty easy to measure. But if you're in finance or technology or customer service or, a whole range of jobs where the output isn't perhaps as easy to measure directly, it's quite hard to measure that. That's a really long-winded way of saying I'm not sure.
But you're right. And I think loads of people are trying to crack this nut. And a question I was going to ask, I spoke at an event recently and I asked, it was an audience full of HR leaders, how many of them were challenged with having a skills gap. And I think nearly every hand went, maybe 95%. And then the question was, how many of you know exactly the skills gap that you're trying to close? Just a handful of arms went up. What are your thoughts on the skills gap and how do you think it can be closed either within your organization or the organizations that you work with?
So you can never close it because it's constantly evolving. So I think all you can really hope for is that you have momentum and you're not standing still. You're kind of running towards it and it's not getting bigger. But with the world we're in now, trying to understand what skills we'll need in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I mean, 5 years is just impossible. 2 years is still pretty hard. So I think it's just that are you doing everything you can to kind of upskill the people that you've got? And then are you clear about the skills that you need in the short term that you need to go out into the market? The whole skills thing is it's not straightforward because organizations can often be looking for skills that, that just don't exist. The schools and, universities haven't yet produced the people with those skills. And I've got sympathy for that because, if you were designing a curriculum 10 years ago, you were probably looking at building a capability to write code. And now that's almost like the last capability that you really want because, it's going to write code. So it just takes a long time. I think people criticize education for being too slow to respond. And there may be some truth in that, but often it's, I think, understanding skills adjacencies. So being able to look at a job, break it into tasks and say, what are the skills that we need? I had a brilliant example the other day, and it was actually from Rolls-Royce, where they took nail technicians, kind of typically female nail technicians that do your nails, and got them painting fan blades in engines.
Wow.
Yeah, there we go. And as soon as you say that, you kind of think, oh yeah, I can see how that skill could transfer. But the imagination it took to be able to spot a skill that you would just not have thought was adjacent to what's needed to paint fan blades. I mean, another perhaps more obvious one is taking people that have been displaced through automation in supermarkets and putting them into care environments because they're often used to dealing with customers, and it's a kind of fast-paced environment. The customers are not always straightforward to deal with, and if you're good at that, then actually working in a care environment is a kind of natural transference of skills that you have. So I think being kind of clever and imaginative about where the skills you need might reside, and then what does it take for you to reskill people to get them to where they want to be, because a lot of the time it will be faster and cheaper to do that than to go out into the market and try and hire them from a competitor.
100%. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because if you think about the cost of attrition, recruitment, onboarding, getting them up to speed, even the brand effect when it doesn't work out with someone. And then you think, well, what are the transferable skills? We've done a piece of work with an organization who their attrition wasn't particularly bad, but they were losing some great people because their competitors had huge budgets. So they could add 20% to salaries, 30% to salaries. And how they're using AI, and it's skills AI, but how they're using it is because what you've described there, and I love that example of the Rolls Royce, that requires a lot of brain power, I guess, creative outward thinking, but having that common skills language and have AI work out, okay, if you've got these skills, how transferable are they to other pathways? And I know I'm having the pleasure of meeting lots of leaders, but I've spoken to some off camera who've said, actually, I'm thinking of going in a new direction. They're maybe in their 40s, 50s, and they're thinking, well, where else can I go? This is where AI is a gem.
Yeah.
Because I know in the work that we've done with higher education, within the skills passport, someone can say, well, could I be that? And then it goes, yeah, you could. You just need these 22 skills and these courses. And that's what I think is exciting.
And almost that sort of democratization of skills, it's not about who you know and who's opening doors for you. It's about, your own kind of motivation, to go and ask those questions about, this is where I am, what could I do? And, once you get a sense of what's possible, how can I get there? Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, just in the last couple of years, the resources around being able to do that are just sensational.
So do you feel as a leader yourself that you're changing your view on skills? Your team might tune in, so...
Yeah.
But just the whole lifelong learning for your workers and then those that you recommend within your partners, is your viewpoint changing, or is it still, it hasn't really changed from the last few years? Or are you thinking, well, no, I can proactively look at focusing on closing the skills gap, future-proofing talent? Or do you think it's more down to the individuals to just do it for themselves?
A bit of both. I mean, I actually think the individual needs to take responsibility. They really do. As if I've been in appraisal, discussions before, and I've kind of written lots of notes and comments, and someone comes in and I go, well, what have you got? And they go, I don't have anything. I have said this. I said, well, why do you expect me to care if you don't? So why don't we do this meeting again, and then you bring back what you want to talk about, and I'll tell you what I want to talk about. And I think that, if you want to call it being just tough love, you can pick your, but really it's, if people don't take that responsibility, and particularly now, where skills are evolving so fast, and roles, traditional roles can be, eroded or reinvented so quickly. They really need to take that responsibility. And then, as I said earlier, hopefully get themselves with an employer who's going to facilitate that and encourage them. But people need to really understand employers don't exist to create employment. They exist to create value for their shareholders. Despite what CEOs might say about being human first and all, they need to say those things. And I'm not saying they don't care, but first and foremost, private organizations exist to create value for the shareholders, not to create jobs. So if you're in a role where it's fast changing, you need to lean into it as hard as you can. That skill, how do I upskill? And, there's no excuse now because large language models, they're not perfect, but they'll give you lots of ideas and lots of thoughts as to how you can evolve your own skills.
So that brings me to a question of then your focus to bring more value within your business for the year, 2 years ahead. Like if you could wave a magic wand and anything can happen, what's happening? What does that look like?
So for us, and actually I think for lots of organizations, particularly service organizations, their protective moat is going to be the quality of their relationships with their their customers and their stakeholders, but particularly their customers, because the more we talk to people, the more we hear them say three things. Efficiency and the innovation you get from technology is really important, but I need to trust you, particularly around talent and employment. There is a huge industry in fake employment and scams and all sorts of things. I think we only ever hear of the tip of the iceberg. So that whole thing about employers trusting the partners that they're working with, that is particularly especially if you're a technology business. So that trust is vital, and then relationships, and that's not just do I like them, but are they bringing me insights that I don't have. So technology on its own won't win. But technology plus trust plus relationships, that's a very powerful combination. Technology is like a bridge that will get you 80% of the way there. It won't get you 100% of the way there. The trust and relationships will be the bit that help you actually get to the other side of where you're trying to go. So, building trusted relationships, I think is going to be, it's always been important, but it's going to be, just absolutely critical now.
I think it ties nicely with how I first came across you on LinkedIn, the profile, because you did this post on Nick. I think you said he was speaking at one of your events.
Nick Marks, yes, Professor Nick Marks, yeah.
And he was talking about is the skill of happiness, which kind of brings me into the whole soft skills. Is that learned or taught? What do you think? And then a leading question from that is, I guess, as AI takes over more of the hard skills, how important are soft skills, do you feel, within your business, and how are you assessing for them?
So I'm going to slightly reframe that, because I don't really think of it in terms of hard skills and soft skills, because the ability to get things done is not a soft skill. It's a proper business critical skill. Knowing how to rewire a house, that's a technical skill. But knowing how to deliver a project by using kind of influence and creating a vision and things like that people might call soft skills, that's not, they're absolutely business critical. And again, AI automation just does, I guess, technical skills, but AI can work right across the spectrum of skills. AI, for example, as a coaching tool. I've spoken to some people that know far more about coaching than I do, and they say it's actually really good. It's really good at working to a coaching model and delivering that model. But that's something that, traditionally we might have called a soft skill. So I think it would be slightly dangerous to kind of think technology just does hard skills. And when you look at conversational AI, some of it is really good. It's not the best that a human can do, but it's as good as a lot of the interactions that you have on a kind of day-to-day basis. So yeah, so I think just being kind of cognizant of that. Yes, I think you can learn. Can you learn how to be happy? I think you can learn how not to be sad and how not to be frustrated, and how to kind of put things in context that allow you to be able to cope. This isn't just a workplace skill. I think this is a kind of life skill. So I think you can train yourself to be, if not happy, then certainly happier, and not get kind of perhaps blown off course, perhaps as easy as perhaps you might have done in the past.
And any predictions for the next sort of year, 2 years, as to the industry that you operate in? You think, I think you've made some really good points around moving forward, it is going to be that trust, adding value, bringing insights to relationships and making sure that they're high quality. It sounds like you're on the AI train, but any other predictions that for anyone working in talent that you think may happen, or even warnings of like, this is something that you should take on board now and not wait till 12 months time?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the skills thing, we've talked about that. That's absolutely essential. Someone said, it was Ruby McGregor-Smith, who was the chief executive of Mighty, one of the UK's biggest employers. And I was talking to her earlier this year, and she said every job is an AI job. And I initially thought, well, I'm not really sure that's true. But actually, even if you're a gardener, you might be using a tool to look at a particular plant that you don't recognize to kind of go, okay, right, I don't know what that is, but here's how I can treat it. Or you're getting paid using AI, you're booking shifts using AI. So AI will impact every job that's pretty much every job that you can imagine. So skilling yourself around that is fundamental. I think within the kind of world of talent and recruiting, business models will change. So traditional staffing firms, I think that model will change substantially, and they'll still be around. There just won't be as many people, and those people will be proper kind of talent strategists and relationship builders. But doing core recruitment as a task, I think, will be pretty much automated. I think, you've got this bit of an arms race at the moment of employers and candidates using AI. And at some point that will need to settle down into, an agreed standard about saying to candidates, look, as an employer, we're going to use AI this way and be clear about it. And then we expect you to use AI in that way. But if you start trying to pretend that you're something or someone that you're not, then that's not right. So I think we'll find a bit of settling down on that, because at the moment it's out of control arms race. But I think other than that, Vanessa, it's just transformation as usual. I don't think the transformation slows down for the foreseeable future, the next kind of 3 to 5 years. And I think in the same way that when the internet came along, the first phase of the internet was basically just doing the same thing quicker. I mean, I bought a CD and I bought a book, it just got to me. I didn't have to go and get it. It just came to me. But essentially, it was the same thing. And it wasn't until the advent of the smartphone and social media that we then saw completely different business models changing. And we're seeing exactly the same with AI. We're seeing ChatGPT, it writes a job spec quicker. It writes a job advert. It does the same thing quicker. And we're moving away from that really quite quickly to doing things very differently and seeing different business models emerge. That's what I think we'll really see over the next few years, that move from essentially using AI to be more efficient to actually using AI to transform industries and jobs and companies and society more widely. That's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Look, you've highlighted challenges as well, but it's all fixable. We're at such an early stage of AI, I think, and the whole point of this podcast is really to share what's happening behind the scenes so that other TM leaders can benefit. That's how we'll get ahead, if we're all sharing along the way. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. I'm very grateful, and I look forward to staying in contact.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me along.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss what's next. And for early access to new episodes, first invites to events, and a chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com, because the future of skills belongs to all of us.